My sister mocked my cheap funeral dress in front of everyone, calling me the family failure. She had no idea the dress cost $50,000. I owned the brand she modeled for, and her termination letter was already signed. This is how I destroyed them all. My name is Zora, and at 32 years old, I stood alone at the edge of an open grave in Atlanta. The rain felt like ice against my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill inside my chest. My mother was gone. The only person who had ever secretly believed in me was being lowered into the wet earth, and I was the only one who had arrived early enough to say a private goodbye. Before I tell you what happened when my family finally showed up, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who had to build your own empire in silence. I pulled my black coat tighter against the wind. Underneath, I wore a dress that looked like a simple, shapeless sack to the untrained eye. There were no logos, no flashy gold buttons, just pure vicuna wool, one of the rarest fabrics on earth, dyed a black so deep it seemed to absorb the light. To my family, I looked like a pauper. In reality, I was wearing $50,000 of quiet power, a prototype from my own unreleased collection. I stood still, letting the rain mix with the tears on my face, waiting for the circus to come to town. The silence of the cemetery was shattered by the aggressive roar of engines. I did not need to turn around to know they had arrived. A fleet of 3 polished black G-wagons tore up the gravel path, stopping just inches from the grass. They parked in a formation that blocked the hearse as if they needed to dominate even death itself. My father Desmond stepped out first. He was 60 but fought aging with expensive treatments and younger tailors. He did not look at the grave, he looked at his shoes. "You idiot, watch the puddles!" he screamed at his driver, his voice cracking like a whip across the solemn grounds. "These are Italian leather, custom-made. Do you know how much these cost?" He was yelling about mud while his wife of 40 years lay in a box 10 feet away. That was Desmond. Appearance over everything. Then the rear door of the lead vehicle opened. My younger sister Bianca emerged. Even in the gloomy weather, she wore oversized designer sunglasses with gold logos on the temples. She paused for a moment, posing as if paparazzi were hiding behind the tombstones. She was 29, the golden child, the rising model who believed the world revolved around her social media feed. She was not alone. A frantic makeup artist trailed behind her, holding an umbrella and dabbing powder onto Bianca's nose. "Not too much, Matt." Bianca snapped loud enough for the priest to hear. "I need to look tragic, but glowing. This is going to be all over the blogs." They marched toward the gravesite like an invading army. When they finally noticed me standing quietly by the mound of earth, their expressions shifted. It was not recognition or comfort. It was the look one gives a stain on a silk tablecloth. They looked at me like I was an alien species. My silence was an insult to their noise. My stillness was an affront to their chaos. They had arrived to perform grief while I was there to live it. Bianca did not just walk past me, she glided with purpose. The heels of her boots sank slightly into the soft mud, but she did not care. She was on a mission to make me feel small. As she reached my side, she veered sharply to the left. Her shoulders slammed into mine with enough force to make me stumble back a step. It was not an accident. It was a declaration of war right there on the edge of our mother's grave. I regained my balance and looked up. Her husband Chad was right there, hovering over her like a well-trained guard dog. He held a massive black umbrella over Bianca's head, keeping her perfectly dry and perfectly pristine. He did not offer to share it. He did not even look at me with anything other than contempt. He just smirked, his eyes sliding over my wet hair and soaked shoulders with amusement. I was standing in the freezing rain while they stood in their dry bubble of arrogance. The rain dripped from my nose and chin, but I refused to wipe it away. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me uncomfortable. Bianca stopped and turned to face me slowly. She lowered her designer sunglasses just enough to look me up and down. Her gaze was physical. It felt like she was peeling the skin off my bones. She let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like glass breaking. Seriously, Zora, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. Do you have absolutely no shame at all? Look at you. You came to Mom's funeral wearing that. She gestured vaguely at my dress with a manicured hand. It looks like a potato sack you pulled out of a dumpster. This is a funeral, Zora, not a costume party for the homeless. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. Her perfume was overpowering, a sickly sweet floral scent that choked the fresh smell of the rain. There are important people here today. She continued, her voice rising just enough for the nearby mourners to hear. This is a social event. It is about respect. It is about status. It is not a place for you to come begging for soup kitchen handouts. You look pathetic. You are embarrassing Dad. You are embarrassing me. Go stand somewhere else before someone thinks we are actually related. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I did not let it reach my voice. I did not speak. I did not apologize. I did not try to explain that the fabric she called a potato sack was actually vicuna wool hand-woven in Peru and worth more than her entire outfit combined. Instead, I simply raised my hand and brushed the shoulder of my coat where she had bumped me. It was a small gesture, a flick of the wrist, like I was brushing away a piece of lint or a speck of dirt. That silence was louder than any scream. It hit her harder than any insult. I saw her eyes widen in disbelief. She expected me to cry. She expected me to fight back so she could make a scene. But I gave her nothing. Her face flushed a deep, angry red. The veins in her neck tightened. She hated being ignored. She hated that her best insult slid off me like the rain on my coat. For a second, I thought she might hit me, but Chad put a hand on her arm, pulling her back slightly. She let out a huff of pure frustration and spun around, her heels digging into the earth as she stomped away to join our father, leaving me alone in the rain once again. Just as I brushed the rain from my shoulder, the atmosphere at the graveside shifted palpably. A sleek silver Maybach rolled to a silent stop behind my father's fleet of black SUVs. The murmurs of the crowd died down instantly. A man stepped out. It was Julian, the marketing director for Onyx. He was a legend in the fashion industry, known for his ruthless taste and his eagle eye for quality. He adjusted his silk tie and began to walk toward the family. He did not look at the flowers or the casket. He looked straight at me. His eyes narrowed behind his rimless glasses, focusing intently on my silhouette. He was not looking at me with the pity or disdain my family showed. He was staring at the fabric of my dress. He knew. He recognized the unique matte absorbency of the vicuna wool, the way it draped with a weight that synthetic blends could never mimic. For a split second, I saw a flicker of professional awe across his face. But Bianca saw his gaze too. Her narcissism rewrote reality in an instant. She saw the most important man in her career looking in our direction, and she assumed he was mesmerized by her. She assumed I was just a smudge on the lens blocking his view of his muse. Out of the way, Zora, she hissed through her teeth. She did not just nudge me this time. She planted her hand squarely in the center of my back and shoved with all her weight. I was not expecting it. My heels slipped on the slick, wet grass. I flailed, trying to catch my balance, but there was nothing to grab but the cold air. I went down hard. My knees hit the saturated ground first, followed by my hands plunging deep into a puddle of freezing brown sludge. The cold muck splashed up, soaking the hem of my $50,000 dress and splattering across my cheek. I gasped, the air knocked out of me. I looked up from the ground to see Bianca immediately striking a pose. A tragic yet beautiful smile plastered on her face for Julian's benefit, completely ignoring the sister she had just assaulted. She had effectively erased me from the frame, replacing my presence with her own manicured perfection. Then a shadow fell over me, blocking the gray light. It was Chad. He was looking down at me, his lip curled in a sneer. He was not offering a hand up. He was digging into his designer wallet. He pulled out a single $20 bill. He did not hand it to me. He crumpled it into a tight ball and tossed it with a flick of his wrist. It landed with a soft, wet plop right in the mud, inches from my fingers, slowly absorbing the dirty water. Here he said, his voice loud and jovial, like he was solving a problem for a stray animal. Go grab yourself an Uber, Zora. Honestly, it is for the best. The G-Wagons are full, and we really cannot have you sitting on Dad's custom Italian leather seats, looking like a swamp creature. You would stain the stitching, and that smell would never come out. He laughed, a short barking sound that made my blood boil. Go on now. Get out of here before you ruin the aesthetic for the VIPs. Take the hint and disappear. I dragged my mud-stained body into the back of the chapel, trying to make myself as small as possible. The air inside was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and heavy perfume. My hands were still trembling from the cold and the humiliation outside, but I refused to leave. I needed to hear my mother eulogized properly. I needed to hear stories about her kindness, her quiet strength, the way she hummed when she cooked. I needed to believe that someone in this room actually knew her. But as Bianca took the podium, the hope died in my throat. She stood under the warm glow of the chapel lights, looking like an angel in black silk. She paused for a dramatic effect, dabbing at a dry eye with a lace handkerchief. When she spoke, her voice was breathless and practiced a performance for the cameras I knew were recording in the back. Today is the hardest day of my life, Bianca began. But I know Mom is looking down on me right now. She would be so proud of the woman I have become. She would want me to be strong. She would want me to celebrate the incredible news I received just yesterday. I froze. Surely she was not going to do this. Not here, not now. Mom always told me I was destined for greatness. Bianca continued, a smile breaking through her feigned grief. She gave me her best features. She gave me these high cheekbones and this figure. Because of her genetic gift, I am able to announce today that I have officially signed the largest contract in the history of Z Onyx. A ripple of polite applause went through the congregation. At a funeral. They were clapping at a funeral. I owe this to Mom, Bianca said, touching her face. She created this canvas. She gave me the tools to become the face of the most luxurious brand in the world. Her legacy lives on through my billboards, through my magazine covers, through the millions of people who will see my face and see her beauty reflected in me. Thank you, Mom, for making me a star. She stepped back, soaking in the admiration. There was not a single word about who our mother was as a person, not a word about her sacrifices. It was an infomercial for Bianca's vanity disguised as a tribute. The disrespect made my vision blur. I could not let that be the final word. I could not let my mother be reduced to a biological donor for Bianca's career. I stepped out from the shadows. The heavy doors clicked shut behind me. The sound of my muddy boots squelching against the polished marble floor echoed through the silent room. Heads turned. Disgust rippled through the pews as they saw the mud caked on my $50,000 dress. I kept my eyes on the microphone. I just wanted 3 minutes. 3 minutes to tell the truth. I made it halfway down the aisle before a large hand slammed into my chest, stopping me cold. It was the head usher, a man on my father's payroll. He did not look at me. He looked past me at Desmond, who was sitting in the front row. My father gave a sharp, imperceptible nod. The service is over. The usher grunted, pushing me back with unnecessary force. I just want to say goodbye, I whispered, my voice cracking. She was my mother too. We are on a strict schedule, the usher hissed. The reception starts in 20 minutes, and we cannot delay the VIP guests. Besides, he looked down at my ruined clothes with a sneer. Mr. Desmond was very clear. We only have time for the people who matter. The keynote speaker has finished. There is no time left for the help. Desmond turned in his seat just enough to lock eyes with me. He checked his gold watch and then turned his back, dismissing me entirely. I stood there paralyzed in the center of the aisle while the organ music swelled, drowning out the sound of my breaking heart. Bianca waved to the crowd like a queen on a balcony, while I was shoved back into the shadows, silenced and erased. I watched the procession of black limousines snake its way out of the church parking lot. They moved like a funeral train for royalty, except the queen was left behind in the mud. The tires kicked up a spray of dirty water that coated my shins, but I did not flinch. Inside those heated leather interiors, my father was probably pouring champagne. Bianca was likely checking her engagement metrics on Instagram. Chad was probably laughing about the $20 he threw at me. They were heading to the repast, a feast of soul food and expensive liquor at my father's estate. It was a celebration of life that I was explicitly excluded from. I turned my collar up against the biting wind and began the long walk to the bus stop. The nearest station was a mile away down a road that had no sidewalks. My boots squelched with every step, heavy with the clay of the cemetery. Cars zoomed past me, splashing more water onto my already ruined coat. To anyone driving by, I looked like a tragedy. A poor woman walking alone in the rain after burying her mother. They probably felt pity. They had no idea that the woman trudging through the slush could buy their entire fleet of cars without checking her bank balance. I reached the shelter of the bus stop, a cracked plexiglass box that offered little protection from the driving rain. I sat on the cold metal bench and reached into the deep pocket of my coat. My hand closed around my phone. To the naked eye, it looked like a cracked burner phone encased in a yellowing plastic case I bought at a gas station for $5. It was part of the camouflage. I peeled back the rubber edge just enough to feel the cold weight of the metal underneath. It was not a burner. It was a Vertu signature Cobra, hand-assembled in England with ruby bearings and a sapphire crystal screen. It was a device that cost more than the G-Wagon Bianca had arrived in. It was a communication tool reserved for the ultra-wealthy, the people who moved mountains with a whisper. It was my command center, and right now, it was my weapon. I dialed a number that was encrypted and not saved in any contact list. It rang once. A crisp, professional voice answered immediately. "Yes, Zora. I am activating the moral review clause in the Z Onyx face of the brand contract." I said, my voice steady and cold, despite the shivering of my body. Specifically Section 14, Paragraph 2 regarding public conduct and disparagement of family. There was a brief pause on the other end as my assistant pulled up the files. "For the new ambassador. For Bianca." "Yes," I replied, watching the rain streak down the glass. She turned a funeral into a press release and assaulted a family member on church grounds. "We have grounds for immediate termination with cause. Prepare the legal team." "Understood. Shall I send the notification immediately?" I paused. I watched the red taillights of the last car disappear around the bend toward the mansion. I imagined Bianca walking into that party thinking she had won. Thinking she was the queen of the world. I wanted her to climb as high as possible so the fall would shatter her completely. "No," I said. "Do not send it yet. Let her have her night. Let her drink the champagne and brag to the guests. Let her think she is untouchable. Serve her the papers tomorrow morning when the hangover sets in. I want the termination to be the first thing she sees when she opens her eyes." "Very good, Zora. Anything else?" "Yes," I said, standing up as the bus approached. "Prepare the jet. I have a gala to crash next week." The bus ride took 40 minutes, and the walk from the stop to my father's estate took another 20. By the time I reached the wrought iron gates of the mansion, I was shivering uncontrollably. The rain had soaked through the layers of my vicuna coat, making it heavy and cold against my skin. The house was blazing with lights. Music spilled out from the open windows, a lively jazz tune that felt entirely inappropriate for the day we had just endured. My father Desmond was throwing a party, not a wake. The circular driveway was packed with luxury cars, the G-Wagons and Maybachs shining under the porch lights. I walked up the front steps, leaving wet footprints on the pristine limestone. Before I could even reach for the handle, the heavy oak door swung open. It was not a butler or a grieving relative. It was Chad. He stood there in his slim-fit suit, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch, looking at me with a mixture of amusement and disgust. He did not move aside to let me in. He planted himself in the center of the doorway, blocking my path completely. "Whoa there, Zora," he said, holding up a hand like a traffic cop. "Where do you think you are going looking like that? You are dripping wet. You will ruin the foyer floors, and Desmond just had them polished for the event. I am here for the repast, Chad," I said, my teeth chattering slightly. "I just want to dry off and get something to eat." "Yeah, that is not going to happen through here," he laughed, taking a sip of his drink. "The VIPs are mingling in the main hall. We have investors here, important people from the label. We cannot have you dragging mud in and killing the vibe." "You look like something the cat dragged in." He pointed a manicured finger toward the side of the house. "Go around the back. Use the kitchen entrance. That is where the catering staff is loading in. You will fit right in with the help. Maybe they will let you scrape the pans if you ask nicely." I looked at him at the smug satisfaction on his face. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed treating the woman who secretly owned the deed to this house like a stray dog. I did not give him the reaction he wanted. I just turned and walked through the wet grass toward the service entrance. I pushed open the heavy kitchen door and was hit by a wall of heat and the smell of fried chicken and mac and cheese. The kitchen was bustling with caterers in white uniforms, plating food for the guests in the other room. But in the corner, huddled around the kitchen island, was a group of my distant cousins and aunts' women I had not seen in years. They were not mourning. They were feasting. But not on food. They had raided my mother's walk-in closet. The island was piled high with her vintage designer handbags, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Hermes. They were snatching them up, arguing over who deserved what. "I want the red Birkin." Aunt Verna snapped, clutching the bag to her chest. "I took care of her when she had the flu in '98. She would want me to have it." "You got the fur coat," Keisha yelled back, tugging on a quilted Chanel flap bag. "I need this for my Instagram. Let go." They were vultures picking the carcass clean before the body was even cold. I stood there dripping onto the linoleum, watching them fight over leather and logos. Not a single person looked up. Not a single person asked if I was okay. Trays of lobster tails and prime rib passed right by me, carried by servers out to the real guests. I was invisible, a ghost in my own home, starving and cold, while they divided the spoils of a life they never respected. The party noise died down eventually, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence in the grand living room. The guests had been ushered out, leaving only the core family and the vultures disguised as relatives. We sat on the plush velvet sofas arranged in a semicircle around the fireplace. Desmond sat in his high-backed armchair, swirling a glass of cognac, looking every bit the grieving widower who was secretly relieved. Beside him sat Mr. Sterling, the family lawyer, and my father's longtime golf partner. He looked flushed, likely from too much free wine, as he fumbled with a thick manila envelope. Bianca sat perched on the edge of the sofa, her knee bouncing with nervous energy. She had changed out of her funeral dress into something more comfortable but equally expensive. A silk loungewear set that probably cost more than my first car. Chad stood behind her, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder, his eyes glued to the envelope like a shark smelling blood. I sat alone on a hard wooden chair in the corner, still damp, still cold, watching the performance unfold. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat loudly, adjusting his spectacles. He broke the wax seal with a theatrical crack that echoed in the silent room. "I, Elena Desmond, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." He began, his voice droning and monotonous. He went through the standard legal jargon, listing assets that made my cousin's eyes widen. The stocks, the offshore accounts, the vintage car collection. Finally, he got to the distribution. "To my beloved husband Desmond, I leave the management of the estate trust. To my daughter Bianca." He paused for effect, looking over his glasses at her. Bianca held her breath. "To Bianca, I leave 100% of my liquid assets, including the $500,000 life insurance policy, the entire jewelry collection, and the deed to this property, the family villa." Bianca let out a squeal that she quickly tried to turn into a sob, burying her face in her hands, while Chad rubbed her back, grinning openly. Desmond nodded solemnly, raising his glass in a silent toast to his wife's wisdom. And to my eldest daughter, Zora. Mr. Sterling continued, his tone shifting to one of dismissal. I looked up, meeting his gaze. I expected nothing. I wanted nothing from them. But the cruelty of what came next still managed to sting. I leave my personal King James Bible, the one with the cracked spine. That was it. A book, not money. Not a keepsake of value. A book she knew I already had because I was the one who read to her from it when she was sick. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat again, reading the addendum. Reasoning for distribution, he read. Zora has always lacked a practical head for business or finance. She has chosen a path of instability and freelance work. Leaving her significant assets would be irresponsible, as she would likely be swindled or wasted on fanciful projects. Bianca, however, is building a brand. She needs capital to maintain her image and secure her future. She is the investment this family must make. The room was silent. Then Desmond chuckled, a low, dry sound. She knew you best, Zora, he said, shaking his head. Always with your head in the clouds. Mom just did not want you feeding the landlords with her hard-earned money. Bianca looked at me, clutching her chest, her eyes shining not with tears, but with triumph. I will take good care of it, Zora, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I promise I will not let Mom down. I will make the Zeonix brand proud. The lawyer snapped his briefcase shut, and the sound echoed like a gavel striking a block. The reading was over, and I had been erased from the family legacy in less than 10 minutes. I expected the meeting to end there, but my father Desmond was not finished. He stood up from his wingback chair and clapped his hands together, once a sharp, decisive sound that demanded attention. He adjusted his silk tie, smoothing the fabric over his chest, and turned his cold eyes toward me. Now that the legalities are settled, we need to address the living situation, Zora, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. You have been staying in the garage apartment for too long. We allowed it while your mother was sick because she wanted you close, but things are different now. We are entering a new era for this family. An era of success and visibility. He gestured toward Bianca, who was busy examining her manicure, indifferent to the fact that she had just inherited everything. Bianca is the future of this family. Desmond continued, his voice swelling with pride. As the new face of Zeonix, she requires facilities that match her status. She cannot be filming content in her bedroom like a teenager. She needs a professional space, a dedicated studio for her live streams, a climate-controlled walk-in closet for the PR packages that are already starting to arrive. The garage apartment is the only suitable space on the property. I sat there stunned. That apartment was my sanctuary. It was where I nursed my mother in her final weeks. It was where I designed the first sketches for the very brand Bianca was now representing. So I need you to clear out, Desmond said, checking his watch as if this were a business transaction. I was going to give you until the weekend to make arrangements, but Chad reminded me that we cannot waste momentum. Chad piped up from behind the sofa, swirling his drink and leaning forward with a grin. Yeah, contractors are coming tomorrow morning at 8 sharp, Zora. We are knocking down that load-bearing wall to put in a ring light station and a dressing area. We need the space empty. If your junk is still there when the crew arrives, they will just toss it in the dumpster. You mean I have 3 days? I asked, trying to process the logistics. No, Desmond corrected, his tone hardening. I mean tonight. You have 3 days to find a new place to live if you want, but you need to remove your belongings from the premises immediately. We cannot have the contractors working around your clutter. I looked at the window where the rain was still lashing against the glass. It was past 10 o'clock at night. The storm was raging outside, mirroring the chaos in that room. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling heavy. I looked my father dead in the eyes, searching for any trace of the man who used to carry me on his shoulders. You are kicking me out, I said, my voice steady but low. You are throwing your own daughter out onto the street in the middle of a storm on the night of her mother's funeral. Is that what is happening here, Dad? Desmond did not flinch. He did not look away in shame. He squared his shoulders and gave me a look of supreme disappointment. Do not play the victim, Zora, he said. You are 32 years old. Most women your age have husbands and mortgages. You have been leeching off us for years, playing artist in the backyard. Consider this a favor. It is a lesson in independence. Sink or swim, Zora. It is time you learned how the real world works. I walked through the rain to the garage apartment for the last time. The space was small and smelled of old paper and lavender, the scent of the final days I spent caring for Mom. I did not have much to pack. Most of my belongings were already in storage or at my penthouse in the city, but I kept a few things here to maintain the illusion of my struggling artist life. I pulled a battered cardboard box from under the bed. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the only thing I had asked for. The only thing Mom had given me that Desmond and Bianca did not know about. It was a single strand of faux pearls. The coating was chipping near the clasp, and they were slightly yellowed with age. Mom had bought them at a thrift store when I was 10. She slipped them into my pocket one day when Dad was yelling about my grades, whispering that I was her precious gem no matter what he said. They were worthless on the market, but to me they were the only tangible proof that she loved me. I lifted them out of the box, letting the cool beads pool in my palm. The door to the apartment banged open. Bianca stood there, framed by the stormy night, still wearing her silk loungewear. She did not look at the damp walls or the meager furniture. Her eyes locked onto the necklace in my hand. I need that, she said, extending her hand palm up. I closed my fingers around the pearls. Get out, Bianca. This is mine. Not anymore, she said, stepping into the room. You heard the lawyer. All jewelry belongs to me. Besides, I have a shoot tomorrow for the new vintage campaign. That tacky little strand is perfect for the distressed aesthetic we are going for. Hand it over. It is not real pearls, Bianca, I said, my voice low. It is plastic. It is garbage to you. She did not care. To Bianca, possession was a game and she had to win every round. She lunged forward, her nails digging into my wrist. I tried to pull away to shield the necklace with my body, but she was fueled by a manic greed. She grabbed the loop of the necklace and yanked. I held on. For a second, we were locked in a ridiculous tug of war. Two sisters fighting over $5 of plastic in a garage. Let go, she shrieked. It is mine. Everything is mine. She gave a violent jerk. I heard the snap before I felt it. The old string gave way. The tension released instantly, sending both of us stumbling back. Then came the sound. Click, click, click. Dozens of plastic beads hit the wooden floorboards, bouncing and rolling in every direction like hail. They scattered under the bed, into the corners, and across the rug. I dropped to my knees, frantically trying to catch them, as if I could put the moment back together. Bianca just stood there, watching the pearls settle into the dust. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. Oops, she said, bringing a hand to her mouth in mock surprise. Well, look at that. I guess it really was just cheap junk. It fell apart so easily. She looked down at me, scrambling on the floor, and shook her head. Honestly, Zora, you are so pathetic fighting over trash. It is not even worth restringing. Just leave it for the cleaners. She turned to leave, but paused. There was one pearl lying near the toe of her expensive slipper. She looked at me, then looked at the pearl. With a deliberate, slow movement, she raised her foot and brought her heel down hard. There was a sickening crunch as the plastic bead shattered into white dust. You missed a spot, she said with a cold smile, and walked out, leaving the door wide open to the storm. I stayed on my knees long after Bianca left. The floorboards were cold and rough against my skin, but I hardly felt it. I crawled slowly, meticulously, hunting for every single pearl. Some had rolled into the dust bunnies under the radiator. Others were lodged in the cracks of the wood. I picked them up one by one, my fingers trembling not from cold, but from a rage so focused it felt like ice in my veins. Each bead I dropped into the black, heavy-duty trash bag made a tiny hollow sound against the fabric of my clothes packed inside. That sound was the period at the end of a sentence. It was the end of my childhood. The end of my hope that this family could be saved. I tied the bag with a double knot. It was fitting in a way. I was leaving with a trash bag slung over my shoulder looking exactly like the failure they accused me of being. But inside that bag, along with the broken pearls and my damp clothes, was the freedom I had been denied for 32 years. I stood up and smoothed down my vicuna dress now ruined by mud and floor dust. I did not look back at the empty garage apartment. There was nothing left there for me. I walked out into the storm and made my way toward the main house. I had to drop the key. I had to make this final. Through the large bay windows I could see them in the living room. The fire was roaring, the crystal chandelier was blazing. Desmond stood by the hearth holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. Bianca was reclining on the velvet sofa, laughing, her head thrown back while Chad refilled her glass. They looked like royalty celebrating a coronation. They were celebrating my erasure. I pushed open the front door. The wind howled behind me, bringing a gust of rain into the foyer. The laughter in the living room died instantly. They turned to look at me. A wet, disheveled woman holding a trash bag standing on their polished marble. Desmond sighed, setting his glass down. Really, Zora? The back door. We discussed this. Do not drip on the rug. I stepped forward, ignoring him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy brass key to the garage apartment. I held it up so the light caught the metal. Then I dropped it. It hit the floor with a heavy metallic clang that rang through the silent room. I am done, I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made even Chad stop smiling for a second. I am leaving. Good, Desmond said, waving a hand dismissively. Close the door on your way out. You are letting the heat out. I looked at each of them. My father, who valued shoes over his daughter. My sister, who stole inheritance to feed her vanity. My brother-in-law, who delighted in cruelty. You keep this house, I said, my eyes locking with Desmond's. You keep the furniture, the cars, the title. Keep it all. But remember this moment. Remember what I am telling you right now. You are not living in this house because you own it. You are living here because of my pity. You are surviving on my mercy, and you do not even know it. There was a second of stunned silence. Then Chad snorted. It started as a giggle, then erupted into a full-blown guffaw. Bianca joined in her high-pitched laughter, grating against my ears. Even Desmond cracked a smile, shaking his head as if I were a toddler telling a ridiculous lie. Pity, Chad shouted, slapping his knee. He walked over to me, getting right in my face, the smell of expensive scotch on his breath. You are talking about pity while holding a trash bag, Zora. You are talking about mercy when you do not even have bus fare. Here, let me check my pockets. Maybe I have another 20 for you. He pretended to search his pockets, mocking me, while Bianca shrieked with laughter from the couch. Go on, Zora, Chad sneered. Take your trash bag and get out. Walk to the bus stop. Maybe you can pay the driver with one of your sad stories. I did not blink. I did not flinch. I just looked at him one last time, memorizing his face, memorizing this moment of absolute arrogance. Enjoy the champagne, I said softly. It will be the last thing you taste before the bitterness sets in. I turned and walked out into the night, the sound of their laughter following me down the driveway, fading only when the thunder rolled overhead, drowning them out completely. It had been 7 days since I walked out of my father's house with a trash bag over my shoulder. To my family, those 7 days were a victory lap. To me, they were the calm before the slaughter. I watched their lives unfold through the screen of my phone, using a burner account to monitor Bianca's social media. She was spiraling into a manic spending frenzy that was honestly embarrassing to watch. She posted 20 stories a day, documenting her new life as the face of Z Onyx. She filmed herself unboxing the PR packages that my team had sent her on my orders. Look at this leather, she squealed into the camera, her face filtered to perfection. You can just smell the money. Z. Onyx only works with the elite. She was preening and posing, caressing the handbags I had designed, unaware that she was praising the very sister she had called a failure. Desmond was right there beside her, soaking up the reflected glory. He had already upgraded his entire wardrobe, charging 5 bespoke suits to Bianca's new line of credit. He posted a photo of himself holding a glass of 30-year-old scotch, captioning it, "Finally, the Desmond name gets the respect it deserves," and Chad. My worthless brother-in-law wasted absolutely no time. He drove a brand new Porsche 911 into the driveway, revving the engine until the neighbors complained. He had used the entire advance check from Bianca's modeling contract to put the down payment on a car he could not afford to insure. They were gorging themselves on the golden goose, completely unaware that the goose was holding the axe. While they played rich, I sat in the living room of my penthouse on the 45th floor, overlooking the entire city. The space was silent. There was no loud music, no desperate need for validation. Just $20 million of floor-to-ceiling glass, polished concrete, and limestone. I did not need to post my life on Instagram to know I had made it. I lived it. My assistant Marcus placed a tablet on the marble coffee table in front of me. The digital rendering of the stage for the upcoming Z Onyx Gala glowed on the screen. It was magnificent. A runway of black obsidian designed to look like it was floating on water. It was perfect. "We have a request from the agency," Marcus said, keeping his voice professional, though I could see the amusement in his eyes. "Bianca Desmond has requested 5 all-access VIP passes for her family. She wants backstage clearance, a private booth next to the CEO, and a meet and greet with the founder." I picked up my digital stylus. My hand did not shake. I drew a sharp red line through her request. "Denied," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast room. "Bianca is a model. She is paid to walk, not to mingle with the board of directors. Restrict her credentials. She and her family are allowed in the general admission area only, no backstage access, no VIP booth, and absolutely no approach to the executive suite." Marcus tapped the screen, locking in the command. "They are going to be furious," he noted. "They think they run this town now." "Let them be furious," I replied, taking a sip of tea. "Anger makes people sloppy. And I need Bianca to be very sloppy when she steps onto that stage. They want to see the boss. They will see her soon enough." The phone vibrated against the marble countertop of my kitchen island. The caller ID flashed a picture of Bianca pouting for the camera, a photo she had set herself years ago. I let it ring twice while I finished reviewing the lighting cues for tonight's show on my tablet. From my vantage point, 45 stories up, the city looked like a circuit board of gold and diamonds. To Bianca, I was likely huddled under a bridge or sleeping on a friend couch. I picked up the old decoy phone and slid my thumb across the cracked screen. "Hello, Bianca. Oh, good, you still have service." Bianca's voice was tinny and loud, filled with the manic energy of someone who had consumed too much caffeine and too much of her own hype. "Listen, Zora, I am feeling generous today. I know you are probably rotting away in some cheap motel or wherever you ended up after Dad kicked you out. It must be so hard watching me succeed while you have nothing." I took a sip of my vintage tea, staring at the reflection of my own success in the glass window. "What do you want, Bianca?" "I want to give you a purpose," she scoffed. "Tonight is the Z Onyx Gala, the biggest night of my life. The entire fashion world will be there. And I realized I need someone I can trust. Not with anything important, obviously, but with the grunt work." I waited, letting the silence stretch. "The agency sent over these assistants, but they are all jealous of me," Bianca continued. "I can see it in their eyes. They want to sabotage me. They want to step on my train or spill water on my silk. I cannot risk it. So I pulled some strings. I got you a ticket." "A ticket?" I repeated, feigning surprise. "Well, not a guest ticket. She laughed a cruel, sharp sound. Do not be ridiculous, Zora. You do not have the wardrobe or the status to walk through the front door. It is a staff pass. It gets you into the service entrance and the holding area. I need you to come and hold the train of my dress. It is 10 feet long and cost more than your life. I need someone to carry it so it does not touch the floor until I hit the stage. And since you are already used to being beneath me, I figured you were perfect for the job. She paused, waiting for me to grovel or perhaps to explode in anger. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to feel benevolent for throwing scraps to the sister she had destroyed. Plus, there is a buffet for the staff in the back, she added, her voice dripping with condescension. I am sure you are hungry. You can fill your pockets with shrimp puffs while you wait for me to shine. Just try not to look too homeless, Zora. Wash your hair in a gas station sink if you have to. I cannot have you smelling like failure when you are standing in my shadow. I looked at the custom gown hanging in my dressing room, the one I would wear when I walked out to fire her. All right, Bianca, I said, my voice calm and compliant. I will be there. I would not miss your big moment for anything. Good, she snapped. Service entrance. 6 p.m. sharp. Do not be late. She hung up. I set the phone down and smiled. She wanted me in the shadows. She wanted me to serve her. I would be there exactly as she asked. And when the spotlight hit, she would wish she had left me in the dark. The Ritz-Carlton was ablaze with flashbulbs, looking like a supernova had exploded on the pavement. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ozone. A velvet rope held back a sea of screaming fans and hungry photographers, all waiting for the arrival of the night's star. When the limousine pulled up, it was not just an arrival. It was an invasion. The door opened, and my family spilled out onto the red carpet like oil spreading on water. Bianca led the charge. She was wearing a dress that shimmered like liquid silver, a custom piece I had approved 3 months ago while sitting in my pajamas. She posed for the cameras, turning her good side to the lens, soaking in the adoration. Behind her, Desmond walked with his chest puffed out so far he looked like a pigeon. He stopped at every microphone, grabbing them before the reporters could even ask a question. Yes, it is all in the genes, Desmond bellowed to a reporter from Vogue. Success runs in the Desmond blood. We breed winners. Bianca is just the latest example of our superior stock. I raised her to be a queen. It takes a diamond to cut a diamond, and I am the diamond cutter. He was taking credit for a career he had tried to sabotage by pushing her toward a real job just 2 years ago. But the cameras did not know that. Beside him, Chad was strutting in his new tuxedo, checking his reflection in the tinted windows of the hotel. He looked less like a husband and more like an accessory, a purse dog yapping at the heels of fame. I stood 20 feet away, tucked into the shadows of the service entrance. I was dressed in severe black from head to toe, a black turtleneck, fitted tactical trousers, and heavy boots. To the uneducated eye, I looked like a bouncer or a stagehand. Over my ears, I wore a heavy noise-canceling headset with a boom microphone. It was the command center for the entire evening. Through it, I was speaking to the lighting director, the sound engineer, and the security team. The family procession made its way down the carpet, and then they saw me. The smiles dropped from their faces instantly. It was like they had stepped in gum. Desmond actually faltered in his step. He whispered furiously to Chad, pointing a shaking finger in my direction. They deviated from the red carpet path, cutting across the velvet rope to confront me before they entered the venue. Chad reached me first. He walked right up to my face and snapped his fingers loud and hard right under my nose. Snap! Snap! Wake up, Zora! He sneered, his voice low so the cameras would not catch his cruelty. Stand up straight. You are slouching like a gargoyle. Do not embarrass Bianca tonight. She worked too hard to have her homeless sister looking like a security guard at the back door. He leaned in closer, his cologne overpowering the night air. Honestly, you should be grateful, he hissed. Most people like you never get this close to real wealth. You are lucky to even breathe the same air as the elite tonight. Try not to choke on it. Now look alive and open the door for us. That is what you are here for, right? The help. I looked at him through the dark lenses of my glasses. I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply reached up to my headset and pressed the talk button. Cue the strobe lights on the red carpet, I said calmly into the mic. Blind them. I watched as a wall of white light exploded behind them, leaving them blinking and disoriented, while I turned and walked into the venue, my access badge swinging from my belt. The VIP dressing room was a chaotic storm of hairspray, adrenaline, and screaming. In the center of the room stood Bianca trying to squeeze into the finale gown. It was a masterpiece of engineering, structured silk and hand-sewn crystals designed to fit a size 0 perfectly. Unfortunately, Bianca had spent the last week celebrating her success with champagne and lobster mac and cheese. The zipper was stuck 3 inches from the top and the fabric was straining dangerously across her ribs. She looked like a sausage casing about to burst. "Get over here, Zora," she shrieked, spotting me by the door. "Do not just stand there like a statue. Fix this." She pointed a manicured finger at the floor, commanding me to my knees. The agency assistants were too terrified to touch her, so I walked over slowly, pulling a needle and thread from my utility belt. I knelt at her feet, the hem of the magnificent dress pooling around me. "It is the dress," she yelled at her reflection in the vanity mirror. "The designers made it too small. They are trying to sabotage me. It is incompetent." It was not the dress, it was the carbs. But I did not say that. I reached up to the open seam. "Sew it shut," she ordered. "Right now, on my body, and do not stick me with that needle, or I will have you thrown out into the alley where you belong." I began to stitch. My hands were steady. I worked with the precision of a surgeon or perhaps an executioner. As I pulled the thread through the delicate silk, Bianca shifted her weight impatiently. Her foot shot out and the heel of her shoe slammed into my hand, pinning my fingers against the hard floor. I gasped, pulling my hand back, but she did not even look down. "Hurry up," she snapped, kicking my hand again, this time harder. "You are moving too slow. You are useless, Zora. Do you know how much this dress costs? The insurance policy on this garment alone is worth more than your entire pathetic life. If you ruin it with your clumsy fingers, I will make sure you never work in this town again, not even as a janitor." I looked up at her. She was preening in the mirror, checking her teeth, admiring her own reflection, completely oblivious to the human being at her feet. She saw me as furniture, as a tool to be used and discarded. I looked back at the seam. I could have sewn it tight. I could have used a reinforced lock stitch that would have held through a hurricane. I knew this fabric better than anyone because I chose it. I knew its tensile strength and its breaking point. Instead, I chose a different thread, a single-ply cotton that looked strong but was brittle under tension. I used a basting stitch. It was a temporary hold. It would look perfect while she was standing still. It would hold while she walked to the center of the stage. But the moment she inhaled deeply to deliver her big speech, the tension would be too much. There I said, tying off the knot and biting the thread. "It is done." Bianca spun around, admiring the fit, unaware that she was a ticking time bomb. Finally she huffed, not even offering a thank you. "Now get out of my sight. You are ruining the aesthetic of the room." I stood up and backed away, watching her practice her poses. She looked beautiful. She looked expensive. She looked like a disaster waiting to happen. I smiled a cold, thin smile that she never saw. "Break a leg, Bianca," I whispered under my breath. "Or better yet, break a seam." The house lights dimmed, and the bass of the runway music began to thump against the ribs of every guest in the ballroom. It was a primal rhythm designed to build anticipation. Then the spotlights converged on the top of the obsidian runway. Bianca stepped out. For a moment, she actually looked the part. The silver dress shimmered under the lights like a second skin, and her hair was slicked back in a severe high-fashion style. She paused at the top of the stairs, soaking in the collective gasp of the audience. She believed the gasp was admiration. I knew it was just the calm before the storm. She began her descent. Her walk was aggressive. She threw her hips forward with every step, modeling the arrogance my father had instilled in her since birth. She was not just walking, she was stomping on the competition. She reached the flat surface of the water illusion runway and picked up speed. Her chin was up. Her eyes were locked on the cameras at the end of the pit. She looked invincible. Then she reached the center of the stage. This was the mark. The place where she was supposed to stop, pivot, and deliver the pose that would land her on the cover of Vogue. She planted her feet. She threw her shoulders back and inhaled deeply, expanding her ribcage to its maximum capacity to project dominance. Snap. The sound was not loud enough for the audience to hear over the music, but I saw it happen. The single-ply cotton thread I had used to baste the bodice gave way instantly. The structural integrity of the gown vanished. The silk which had been straining against her frame suddenly lost its grip. The bodice did not fall off completely, but it slid down 3 inches in a heartbeat. The carefully constructed silhouette collapsed. The fabric bunched awkwardly around her waist, creating a roll of material that looked like a deformed tire. Bianca gasped and her hand flew to her chest to catch the slipping fabric. The sudden movement threw her off balance. Her left heel wobbled on the glass surface. To catch herself, she had to take a wide, awkward step to the side. It looked like a stumble. It looked clumsy. The elegance evaporated in a millisecond. She tried to correct her posture, but the dress was now too loose in the top and too tight in the hips. She could not stride. She had to shuffle. Her walk transformed from a supermodel strut into a restricted waddle. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. The polite applause died out, replaced by a low hum of whispering. I saw heads leaning together. I saw fingers pointing. Is she drunk? Someone whispered near the front row. Is that part of the show? Asked another. Phones were raised higher not to capture her beauty, but to record the disaster. Bianca froze. The smile on her face became a rictus of terror. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for an anchor. Then they found me standing in the dark of the technical wing. The panic in her eyes hardened into pure accusation. She knew. In that moment, she knew I had done this. She glared at me, her hand clutching the ruined dress to her chest, trying to telepathically scream at me while maintaining her composure for the cameras. She tried to pivot, but the fabric twisted around her legs, making her look like a toddler learning to walk. She was trapped in the spotlight, exposed and ridiculous. Bianca snatched the microphone from the stand with a desperation that made her knuckles white. Her other hand was clamped firmly over her chest, holding the ruined bodice in place. She knew she looked ridiculous. She knew the audience was whispering. Her narcissism kicked into overdrive. In her mind, there was only one way to save this moment. She had to take control of the narrative. She had to prove she was above the mishap, above the whispers, and definitely above me. She flashed a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, a predator cornered, but still dangerous. Thank you. She breathed into the mic, her voice amplified and echoing through the tense ballroom. Thank you all for your patience. True art is always a little messy, isn't it? She laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated on the nerves. I want to thank my parents, Desmond, and the spirit of my late mother. They gave me the genes, the drive, and the platform to stand here tonight as the face of the future. She paused, scanning the room until her eyes locked on the technical wing where she knew I was standing. Her expression hardened. The mask slipped. She decided to go off script, to use her moment of glory to twist the knife one last time. But there is someone else I need to thank. She continued, her voice dropping an octave, pretending to be solemn. Someone who is actually in the building tonight, working in the shadows where she belongs. My sister Zora. The spotlight operator, confused by her gaze, swung the beam toward the side entrance, illuminating the black curtain where I stood. I did not step out. I just watched. People ask me what drives me, Bianca said, pacing awkwardly as she held up her dress. What makes me wake up at 4 in the morning? What makes me hustle harder than anyone else? It is fear. Pure fear. Fear of ending up like her. She pointed a long manicured finger at the dark corner. I want to thank my sister for being the ultimate cautionary tale. Her uselessness, her poverty, her absolute failure to launch has been the greatest motivation of my life. Watching her waste her potential, watching her struggle to pay rent, watching her wear rags to our mother's funeral, it lit a fire in me. She taught me exactly what I must never become. She is the shadow that proves how bright I shine. So thank you, Zora. Thank you for being the failure that forced me to be a success. She waited for the applause. She expected laughter. She expected the elite crowd to join in her mockery of the poor relation. But the room went dead silent. The air in the ballroom turned solid. The silence was not respectful. It was horrified. Guests exchanged glances. Their champagne glasses paused halfway to their lips. The cruelty was too raw. It was too ugly. Even in a room full of cutthroat business people, there was a line, and Bianca had just sprinted across it. Only two people broke the silence: Desmond and Chad. My father stood up, clapping his hands high over his head, beaming, as if she had just recited poetry. Chad let out a whoop of support, whistling through his fingers. Their lonely applause echoed in the cavernous room, sounding pathetic and grotesque against the backdrop of 1,000 silent, judging eyes. They were clapping for their own demise, and they were too arrogant to hear the silence of the grave they had just dug for themselves. The applause from Desmond and Chad was still echoing in the cavernous silence when the feedback loop began. It started as a low hum, a vibration that rattled the champagne glasses on the tables. Then, in a fraction of a second, it spiked into a high-pitched electronic shriek that sounded like a jet engine tearing itself apart. The noise was physical. It slammed into the audience with the force of a shockwave. Hands flew to ears. Wine glasses shattered. The few people who had been politely clapping flinched as if they had been struck. Bianca dropped the microphone. It hit the glass runway with a thud that was instantly swallowed by the screaming audio system. She stumbled back, hands pressed over her ears, her face twisting from arrogance into pure confusion. She looked up at the technical booth, her mouth moving in a silent scream of rage, demanding to know who was ruining her moment. Then the lights died. The spotlights, the ambient glow, the house lights, everything went black. For a heartbeat, the ballroom was plunged into total darkness. The audio screech cut out abruptly, leaving a ringing silence that was heavier than the noise had been. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Boom! The massive LED wall behind Bianca ignited. It did not return to the tasteful gold and white branding of the evening. It exploded into a wall of aggressive blood-red light. The intensity was blinding, washing the entire stage and the first 10 rows of the audience in a crimson glare. Bianca stood silhouetted against it, looking small and terrified like an insect trapped in amber. On the screen, the elegant Xeonix logo appeared in stark black against the red background. Then a digital animation played out, large and violent. A thick black line slashed diagonally across the logo. Then another, forming a jagged X over the brand name. It was the universal symbol for cancelled, for invalid, for terminated. The air in the room grew cold. This was not a technical glitch. This was a production. This was a statement. The audience sat frozen, their faces bathed in the red light, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Bianca spun around, staring up at the massive screen that was now broadcasting her professional demise. She looked wild, her ruined dress slipping further, her hair coming loose from its severe style. Then my voice filled the room. It did not come from the side stage or a handheld mic. It came from the main array, the massive speakers suspended from the ceiling that were designed to reach the back of a stadium. My voice had been processed, deepened slightly, and added with a touch of reverb that made it sound omnipresent. It sounded like judgment itself descending from the heavens. Cut. The single word hit Bianca like a physical blow. She flinched, looking around wildly, trying to locate the source. That was a very moving performance, Bianca. My voice boomed, rolling over the crowd. Truly cinematic. The tears, the passion, the absolute delusion. It was a masterclass in fiction. I paused, letting the words sink in, letting the confusion ripple through the crowd. But you made one critical mistake in your acceptance speech. You thanked your genes. You thanked your father. You even thanked your failure of a sister for the motivation. But you forgot the most important person in the room. You forgot to thank the person who signs your checks. You forgot to thank the person who owns the stage you are standing on. And you definitely forgot to thank the person who just canceled your contract. A single beam of white light sliced through the red gloom of the ballroom. It bypassed the stage entirely. It bypassed the VIP section where my father sat with his mouth open. It landed with surgical precision on the technical wing, illuminating the dark corner where I had been standing for 3 hours. The sudden brightness made the dust motes dance in the air. I did not blink. I stared straight ahead into the blinding glare, knowing that every single eye in the room was now fixed on me. Slowly, deliberately, I reached up and removed the bulky headset. I dropped it onto the console with a clatter that was picked up by the open mic. Then my hands went to the zipper of my nondescript black technician jacket. I pulled it down in one smooth motion. I shrugged my shoulders and let the heavy fabric slide down my arms, pooling on the floor like a shed skin. Beneath the disguise, I was not wearing staff uniforms. I was wearing armor. It was a gown of liquid gold woven from the same rare vicuna wool as my funeral dress, but threaded with 24-karat gold filament. It hugged my body like it had been poured on. Scattered across the bodice and trailing down the train were hundreds of black diamonds, glittering like dark stars against a golden sky. It was the Morning Star design in its final triumphant evolution. It was not just a dress. It was a capitalization statement. It screamed power. It screamed wealth. It screamed that I was not the help, I was the history. I stepped out of the technical booth. The moment my foot hit the main floor, the atmosphere shifted. The security guards who had been blocking the aisle for the entire show immediately snapped to attention. They did not just move aside. They bowed their heads, stepping back to create a wide, clear path to the stage. Julian, the creative director who Bianca had tried to impress at the cemetery, ran forward. He did not look at Bianca. He looked at me. He extended his hand, not to help me, but to gesture toward the stairs like a servant ushering a queen to her throne. "Right this way, Ms. Zora," he murmured, his voice filled with reverence and fear. "The stage is yours." I walked past him, ignoring his hand. I did not need help. I ascended the stairs to the obsidian runway, my gold train flowing behind me like a river of fire. The sound of my heels on the glass was the only sound in the room. Click, click, click. I walked toward Bianca. She stood frozen at the center of the stage, her hands still clutching her ruined dress, her mouth slightly open. She looked at me, and for the first time in her life, she did not see her failure of a sister. She saw the owner of the ground she stood on. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale and trembling beneath the red lights. I stopped 3 feet away from her. I looked her up and down, letting the silence stretch until it was unbearable. I was no longer Zora the outcast. I was Zora the architect. And I had come to inspect the demolition. I reached out and gently took the microphone from Bianca's trembling hand. She did not resist. She couldn't. She was paralyzed by the proximity of the woman she had tormented, now standing before her, draped in gold and diamonds. I turned to the audience. The red lights washed over us, but in my gold gown I glowed like an ember in the ash. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice calm and commanding, echoing through the silent hall. "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe a correction is in order. My name is Zora, and for the last 5 years I have been operating in the shadows, building the very empire you are celebrating tonight. I am the founder, I am the head designer, and I am the CEO of Z Onyx." A gasp tore through the room. I saw my father Desmond clutch his chest, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Chad dropped his drink, the glass shattering on the floor unnoticed. But I kept my eyes on Bianca. I took a step closer to her. Bianca, do you remember what you said to me at the cemetery? You called my dress a potato sack. You called it a costume for the homeless. You laughed at it while our mother was being put in the ground. I gestured to the screen behind us, where a photo of me at the funeral suddenly appeared. It was high resolution, taken by the security team I had hired to watch my back. It showed the black dress in stark detail. That dress, I continued, pointing at the image, was not rags. It was the prototype for the Morning Star collection. It was woven from pure vicuna wool gathered from the high Andes. It was hand-dyed using an ancient technique that takes 6 months to perfect. The raw materials alone cost more than your entire modeling advance. That potato sack has a market value of $50,000. Bianca's jaw dropped. She looked from the screen back to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. 50,000, she whispered. Yes, I said, my voice dripping with disdain. And you did not recognize it. You looked right at it and saw garbage. Do you know why? Because you do not have taste, Bianca. You have trends. You do not understand quality. You only understand logos. You are not a muse. You are not an artist. You are simply a mobile coat hanger, a mannequin made of flesh and arrogance. And looking at you now, standing there with your bodice falling apart and your dignity in tatters, I have to say you are a broken mannequin. And Z Onyx does not display its masterpieces on broken equipment. I let the insult hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. She was shrinking before my eyes, the golden child reducing to dust under the weight of her own ignorance. She had judged me by the cover, and now the book was closing on her. I snapped my fingers, and the massive screen behind me shifted again. The beautiful studio portraits of Bianca vanished. In their place, a gritty high-definition video began to play. It was footage from the cemetery. The angle was high, taken from the security drone I had deployed to monitor the perimeter. The audience gasped as they watched the scene unfold in 40-foot-high clarity. They saw Bianca shove me into the mud. They saw her laugh as I struggled to stand. Then the video cut to a new angle. This one was from 20 minutes ago inside the VIP dressing room. The hidden camera in the vanity mirror had captured everything. The ballroom was dead silent as they watched Bianca kick my hand while I was sewing her hem. Her voice boomed over the speakers, shrill and cruel. "If you ruin it with your clumsy fingers, I will make sure you never work in this town again." The malice was undeniable. It was not a diva moment. It was abuse. The crowd looked from the screen to the woman standing on stage, their expressions shifting from shock to disgust. Bianca stood paralyzed, her eyes glued to the evidence of her own cruelty, unable to look away from the monster she truly was. I reached into the hidden pocket of my gold gown and pulled out a thick document. It was bound in blue legal backing. I held it up so the light caught the Onyx seal embossed on the front. "Do you recognize this, Bianca?" I asked, my voice cutting through the tension. "This is the contract you signed yesterday. The one you bragged about. The one you thought was your ticket to millions." I flipped the document open to a page I had bookmarked with a red tab. "Let me read you clause 14.2. I said, my voice steady and cold. "The face of the brand must maintain a standard of moral rectitude, both in public and private life. Any act of violence, discrimination, or abuse towards staff or family members constitutes an immediate breach of agreement." I looked up from the paper, locking eyes with her. "You insulted your mother's memory at her funeral. You physically assaulted your sister. And tonight, you verbally and physically abused a member of the Onyx staff. You did not know it was me, but that does not matter. You violated the morality clause 3 times in 48 hours. I took a step closer, closing the distance until I was looming over her. "You are fired, Bianca. Effective immediately. Your contract is void. You are no longer the face of anything." She opened her mouth to speak, to beg, to scream, but I cut her off. "And because you breached the contract with cause, the penalty clauses are automatically triggered." I turned the page, reading the final number that would end her life as she knew it. "For damages to the brand reputation and breach of conduct, you are liable for the full value of the projected campaign plus legal fees." My lawyers filed the injunction 10 minutes ago. You owe the Onyx $3 million, and we expect payment within 30 days, or we will seize your assets. You wanted to be expensive, Bianca. Now you are. You are the most expensive mistake this company ever made, and I am collecting every cent. The silence in the room was broken by a frantic scuffling from the VIP section. I watched from my podium as my father Desmond scrambled out of his seat. His face was no longer pale with shock. It was flushed with a desperate, calculating greed. He buttoned his suit jacket as he ran toward the stage, a wide plastic smile plastered across his face. He grabbed Chad by the arm, dragging the stumbling man along with him. They looked like two rats trying to board a ship they had just tried to sink. "Zora, my baby." Desmond shouted, his arms wide open as if he were greeting a long-lost friend. "I knew it. I knew it all along. You are a genius. This was a test, wasn't it? You were testing Bianca's character. You were testing our loyalty." He laughed, a loud, booming sound that fooled absolutely no one. "Well played, sweetheart. You really got us. Now come give your old dad a hug. We have so much to discuss about the future of the company." He tried to step onto the runway, but three massive security guards stepped in front of him, forming a wall of black suits and folded arms. Desmond slammed into them, bouncing back like a rubber ball. He looked up at me, confused and hurt, acting the part of the rejected father perfectly. "Zora, tell them to move," he commanded, though his voice wavered. "It is me. It is Dad." I looked down at him. I did not feel anger anymore. I felt nothing but disgust. "Stay where you are, Desmond," I said, my voice amplified and icy. "You do not get to step on my stage. You do not get to claim my success. You called me a failure an hour ago. You cannot rewrite history just because you smell money." Then I turned my gaze to Chad. He was standing behind Desmond, sweating profusely, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. He looked ready to bolt. "And you, Chad," I said, softer, but with deadly precision. "You were very loud earlier tonight. You had a lot to say about my poverty, about my $20 Uber ride. Do you remember?" Chad swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace. "It was just a joke, Zora," he stammered. "You know me. Just family banter." "Family banter," I repeated. "Is that what you call it? My private investigator calls it projection." I pulled a small black folder from my dress pocket. I did not open it. I just tapped it against the palm of my hand. "I ran a background check on you, Chad, the moment Bianca brought you home. Do you know what I found? I found $200,000 in gambling debt held by some very impatient people in Atlantic City." A gasp went through the crowd. Chad's knees buckled slightly. "You were banking on Bianca's contract," I continued relentlessly. "You spent her signing bonus on a Porsche before the check even cleared because you needed to look rich while you were drowning. You thought you had hit the jackpot. But now Bianca does not have a contract. She has a lawsuit. She owes me $3 million. I leaned forward, looking down at him like he was a bug under a microscope. "So Chad, if Bianca is broke and in debt, who is going to pay your bookies? You are not just poor now, you are a liability." Chad made a choking sound. The color drained from his face so fast he looked gray. His eyes rolled back in his head and his legs gave way completely. He collapsed onto the red carpet in a heap of expensive tuxedo and cheap fear. Desmond stepped away from him, looking at the unconscious man with revulsion, instantly distancing himself from the failure. I stood over them both, the Golden Queen on her obsidian throne, watching the house of cards finally collapse. The morning sun rose over the estate, but it brought no warmth to the people inside. It only brought the harsh light of reality. I pulled up to the curb in my Rolls-Royce Phantom, the gravel crunching beneath the heavy tires. I did not come alone. Behind me, a county sheriff cruiser rolled to a stop, its lights flashing silently against the brick facade of the mansion. I stepped out of the car, adjusting my sunglasses. I held a thick envelope in my hand. The morning air was crisp and smelled of impending justice. Desmond opened the front door before I even reached the steps. He looked terrible. He was still wearing his tuxedo trousers from the night before and an undershirt. His eyes were bloodshot, and his face was gray with a mixture of hangover and existential dread. When he saw the sheriff standing behind me, his expression shifted from confusion to defensive anger. He marched out onto the porch, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You have some nerve showing up here, Zora," he shouted, his voice cracking. "After the stunt you pulled last night. You destroyed your sister. You humiliated this family. Get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." I stopped at the bottom of the steps. I looked up at him with the same pity one might feel for a bug that has already been stepped on, but does not know it is dead yet. "Your property," I repeated calmly. "That is an interesting choice of words, Desmond," he sputtered. "Of course it is my property. Your mother left it to Bianca. We read the will. You were there. Now get lost." I shook my head slowly. I opened the envelope and pulled out a document stamped with the official seal of the county clerk. Mom could not leave this house to anyone, Desmond, because Mom did not own it. The bank did. Did you really think the mortgage just paid itself for the last 5 years while you were buying custom suits and playing golf? Did you think Mom's disability checks covered a $10,000 a month mortgage payment? Desmond went silent. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "She was broke," I said, my voice hard. "She was going to lose this house 5 years ago. I stepped in. I set up a blind trust through my law firm. I have been paying every single cent of the mortgage taxes and insurance for half a decade. I bought the debt, and 3 months ago when the final payment cleared, the title transferred. I walked up the steps until I was standing on the same level as him. I shoved the document against his chest. Read the name on the deed, Desmond. It does not say Elena, it does not say Bianca, and it definitely does not say Desmond. It says Zora Williams. This is my house. It has been my house for years. You were just a squatter living in my charity." Desmond grabbed the paper, staring at it with wild eyes. His hands shook so hard the paper rattled. "But you lived in the garage," he whispered. "You let us treat you like a dog." "I did," I replied, cold as ice. "Because Mom asked me to keep the peace. But Mom is gone. And you tried to kick me out of my own property. You told me to leave in the middle of a storm. You told me to learn about independence. Well, here is your lesson." I signaled to the sheriff, who stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "This is a formal eviction notice, Desmond. You are trespassing. You and your leech of a son-in-law and your unemployed daughter. You are all removing yourselves from the premises." Desmond looked at the sheriff, then back at me, panic rising in his throat. "Where are we supposed to go? You cannot do this. We need time." I checked my diamond watch. "You have exactly 1 hour," I said. "Whatever is not outside the gate in 60 minutes belongs to me. And unlike you, I do not keep trash around. Start packing, Dad. The clock is ticking." The lawn of the estate looked like a landfill. It was a poetic justice that I savored from the other side of the wrought iron gate. The sheriff's deputies were efficient. They did not pack boxes with care. They did not wrap fragile items in bubble wrap. They swept armloads of designer clothes, expensive electronics, and personal trinkets into heavy-duty black trash bags, the exact same kind I had used when I was thrown out. They tossed them onto the wet grass with a dull, thudding rhythm that sounded like the heartbeat of my revenge. Bianca sat on a pile of bags that contained her entire wardrobe. She was unrecognizable. The waterproof mascara she had bragged about at the funeral was running in dark streaks down her cheeks, staining the collar of her silk blouse. Her hair was a tangled mess, and she was shivering not just from the cold, but from the shock of her new reality. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was sobbing, a low, broken sound of a child who realizes the game is over, and she lost everything. She clutched a single shoe in her hand, a Louboutin with a broken heel, a perfect metaphor for her life. Chad paced back and forth on the sidewalk, his phone pressed to his ear. His swagger was gone, replaced by a frantic, terrified energy. I could hear his voice cracking as he left voicemail after voicemail. "Come on, man, pick up. I just need a small loan. 5 grand. No, 2 grand. I am good for it. I swear." He paused, listening to the silence on the other end, then dialed again. "Hey, bro, it is Chad. Listen, I am in a bit of a jam. Can I crash on your couch for a few days, just until my investments clear?" He pulled the phone away, looking at the screen, as another call went straight to voicemail. He had burned every bridge he ever crossed, and now he was stranded on an island of his own making. No one was coming to save him. Desmond stood apart from them, watching the deputies lock the front door. When he saw me standing by my car, he ran to the gate, his hands gripping the bars like a prisoner. His face was pale, his eyes wide with desperation. "Zora, please," he begged, his voice trembling. "You cannot do this. We are family. We are blood. Blood is thicker than water, Zora. You cannot just throw your own father out on the street like a criminal. Think about your mother. Think about what she would want. She would want us to be together. She would want you to forgive us." I walked up to the gate, stopping just out of his reach. I looked at his hands clutching the cold metal. Hands that had never held me when I cried. Hands that had signed away my rights without a second thought. "Blood," I said, my voice calm and flat. "You talk about blood, Desmond, but you bled me dry for years. You took my dignity. You took my home. You tried to take my future. You are right. Blood is thicker than water. That is why it leaves such a stain when you spill it. And you spilled mine the day you chose greed over your own daughter. But we can fix this," he pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. "I can change. I will make it up to you. Just give me a chance. Let us come back inside. Let us be a family again." I shook my head slowly. "There is no family here, Desmond," I said. "Just a landlord and some tenants who failed to pay their rent. My mother is gone, the sister I knew is gone, and the father I wanted never existed. You are just strangers with my last name, and strangers do not live in my house for free. Goodbye, Dad." I reached out and firmly removed Desmond's hand from the metal bars of the gate. His grip was weak, clammy, and desperate, like the handshake of a man who knows he has already lost the deal. I adjusted my dark sunglasses, shielding my eyes not from the morning sun, but from the pathetic sight of their ruin. They looked like ghosts fading rapidly into a past I had already outgrown. "Family," I said, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. "You keep using that word as if it is a magic spell, as if it can erase years of neglect and betrayal just because we share DNA. But magic is not real, Desmond. Consequences are." I took a step back, putting a final insurmountable distance between us. "That family you are talking about? It died at the cemetery last week. We buried it in the mud along with Mom. What is standing here now is not family. It is just a failed business partnership. You tried to leverage my assets for your own gain. You tried to liquidate my dignity to fund your vanity, and you went bankrupt." I looked him up and down one last time, my expression void of any warmth. And if there is one thing I learned from building an empire from nothing, it is this: I never ever invest in losing ventures, and you three are a total loss. I turned my back on them. I did not wait for a response. There was nothing left to say. The air felt cleaner the further I walked away from the gate. My driver stood by the open door of the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The interior smelled of fresh leather and absolute silence. It smelled like peace. I slid into the back seat, the heavy door closing with a solid, reassuring thud that shut out the world of noise and neediness I was leaving behind. As the car pulled away from the curb, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, I looked up at the rearview mirror. I saw them standing there on the side of the road, surrounded by black trash bags. Desmond was slumped against the gate, his head bowed in defeat. Bianca was still sitting on her pile of clothes, her face buried in her hands. Chad was pacing in tight, frantic circles, screaming into a phone that no one was answering. They looked small. They looked insignificant. They looked like strangers. The car accelerated, merging onto the highway. The image in the mirror shrank, turning them into tiny specks against the sprawling estate they used to call home. And then they were gone, vanished around the bend. Just like that. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. The screen lit up with a name I was excited to see. It was the CEO of a European luxury conglomerate I had been negotiating with for months. A new deal, a new horizon, a new life that belonged only to me. I picked up the phone, a smile spreading across my face that reached all the way to my eyes. "This is Zora," I said, my voice clear and light, unburdened by the weight of the past. "Yes, I am available. In fact, I have never been more free." The city skyline rose up ahead of me, gleaming in the morning light. I was not looking back. I was driving straight into the sun, and for the first time in my life, the road was entirely mine. Zora's journey teaches us that true power never needs to shout. While her family chased fleeting validation through logos and status, she built an empire in silence, proving that self-worth is internal, not granted by others. Her story highlights a painful but necessary truth: sometimes shared DNA does not equal family. Toxic relationships are heavy anchors that must be cut loose to truly soar. Ultimately, the greatest success isn't just financial wealth. It is the freedom to walk away from those who disrespect you. Zora showed us that you never have to set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. If you have ever found strength in silence or had to walk away to save yourself, hit subscribe and share your story in the comments below.